Great. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Ashish Gadnis. I am one of the co-founders of BanQu. And, my work is my passion, which is I'm focused on this for purpose, for profit model. And our core anchor is reducing extreme poverty in the world using a business lens.
Okay, thank you. And so you have 27 years of global business and social entrepreneurship experience. How did you get interested in blockchain technology?
Oh, I'm old, so that's a good way to start there. But to be honest, I got interested in it because of a incident or a series of incidents that kind of led me to it. I had sold my last startup in 2012, and I was kind of retired. I wanted to do something with poverty. I grew up poor in India, and I spent a couple of years volunteering in the DRC in Congo. And at that time, 2013, 2014, there was a lot of conversation around blockchain, Bitcoin, and things like that. I really didn't care about the cryptocurrency side, but what I was very curious about this distributed data ledger model that everybody talked about. And in end of 2014, I actually got into this fight argument where one of the women farmers was refused a bank account, and one thing led to another, and the guy said, I can't bank her, but I'll bank you. That's where the name comes from, the company I run today. But the reason why I'm sharing that with you is because it leads me to why blockchain. Because in that interesting conversation, what I realized, that mother who was so smart, again, as I said, women are smarter than men, she had no way to prove her existence in the supply chain, even though we, right, in the first part of the world, buy her coffee, think it is fair trade, feel good about ourselves, but she at no given time can prove her existence in that supply chain because corporations or NGOs have a copy of her data, which is traditional database systems, but she does not have equal rights in that transaction. That's kind of when I realized that the power of blockchain is actually at that mother's level, because if you use blockchain the right way, which is the distributed ledger technology, then that mother will get an equal copy that proves her existence in the global supply chain, right? That's when I started BanQu in 2016. I started it with blockchain as the core because it allowed me to solve that problem of the mother now having the ability to prove her existence in the supply chain. Does that help?
Yes, then that's very powerful. And so would you say that that specific incident at the bank is what really drove you or what motivated you to start BanQu, or are there any additional motivations apart from that one experience?
It was kind of a build up to a lot of things, right? So, I'll be 52 this year. I grew up poor in India, but my poverty in India was very different from poverty I saw in Congo, right? So, I had to share a bathroom with other families. So, and I thought that was really bad because I was poor. But then you go to Congo, you realize, wait a minute, there is no bathroom, right? So it's a different level. So I've always had this notion that, someday when I'm, don't need money, I should be able to do something for poverty, right? And I think that after that happened, I stepped down from my volunteer role, traveled the world to figure out somebody must have solved this problem, right? And I think it's important to kind of make sure that the problem is defined well, which is there are millions of people in sourcing and distribution supply chain, so recycling, waste picking, agriculture, factories that participate in our consumer goods every day: jeans, coffee, cacao, diamonds, right? Yet cannot prove their existence, right? And for me, that was kind of this mind bending notion that, wait a minute, why has nobody developed an app for this, right? And I'm Indian. I kind of jokingly say, I said, if I meet another Indian, who makes an app for poor people, I'm going to lose all my hair, right? Um, and I didn't find anybody who would actually build something that the mother could say I exist equally, right? And that's kind of when I realized, wait a minute, blockchain actually is this fascinating technology that allows her to own the copy, while the brand can also own the copy and say, yes, she is our cacao farmer, right? So it's kind of long answer, but all built it up and said, okay, now I can address this problem around inequity in supply chains using blockchain.
And that's definitely something powerful. And two of your main goals are to uplift people out of extreme poverty and to empower people by creating dignity through identity. How does BanQu achieve those goals?
Great question. So there's a flaw in global supply chains, right? And the flaw comes down to three words. If you look at supply chains, everybody wants their supply chains to be traceable and transparent, but they're missing a third word, which is equitable. And this kind of goes to the dignity and poverty, right? If you look at a supply chain, going back to the mother's coffee that goes through 4 tiers, from her to the co-op to the transporter to your cup of coffee in New York, you pay $12 for. In that example, you could make the supply chain traceable and transparent using traditional systems, which is have databases and Excel spreadsheets, blah, 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 right? Take digital photos of the land. But what it's missing, it's not equitable. And because it's not equitable, the mother does not build her economic passport, what I call economic identity, right? Which means she does not have the history to say, I am growing barley for AB and Bev, or I am growing coffee for a coffee company, right? And for me personally, right, it's very personal to me because if you don't have that equitable piece, then the supply chain's traceability and transparency can't stand, right? And how you solve poverty is by ensuring that everybody in that supply chain, including that mother, now can prove her existence. If you can't prove your existence, then the world recognizes you. If the world recognizes you, you're bankable. If you're bankable, you have access to credit, you have access to tools, and most importantly, you can now be portable. So let's go back to that Congo Zambia border example. If a war breaks out and you are forced to now move to a refugee camp, your entire life is reset because you cannot prove you were selling barley, right, on that border. Whereas with BenQ, the way we built it, that mother is getting paid normal currency, no crypto. She's maintaining a history on blockchain, which is her economic passport. And if she gets uprooted, she does not lose access because she owns her data. And so giving you a long answer, but the detail is important, which is the two things, right? You can't just pull people out of poverty if you don't treat them with dignity and equality. That's why we don't use the word pity or help at BenQ. Does that help? I'm kind of giving you more detail than you need, but
No, this is great. That's exactly what we wanted to understand. So thank you for sharing.
can
Did
I
you
give
have?
you one more example? If
Yes.
yeah, just
Yes.
I think
Yes.
it's important, right? And you can cut out whatever you don't want, but it's important because I'm a big believer in this, right? Is when I came to the United States at $240, right? But I came legally. If anybody's listening, you never know these days. But what's important is that at the end of the month, right, I had a rent receipt, I had a pay stub, and I had a light bill. I was able to take these three pieces of paper, staple it, and open a bank account. 1994, right, in Boston. Why that is important is because it established my credibility, my existence, right? And I was able to have a successful career. In 2014, or forget 2014, 2020, last year, right? I know of Congolese coffee farmers who still don't have bank accounts, even though they grow coffee that you're paying $40 for a pound, right? And why is that? We have brought a lot of technology to people in poverty because we think about them from a pity lens. But if we break that pity lens and say, no, this mother is a very awesome functioning member of her supply chain, and she should be able to prove her economic passport or economic identity, just the way I was in 1994, that's when you're going to address gender inequality. That's when you're going to address reduction of extreme poverty. I hope that helps.
Yes, that definitely helps. Thank you so much for expounding on that. So our next question is, what are some of the challenges you experienced with starting a blockchain-based company?
Oh, I experience them every day, even today, like today, this morning, right? And there are three primary challenges that we run into, right? Even though today we're live in 45 countries. We have over 1 million people on our platform, right? Smallholder farmers, waste pickers. But here are the three challenges. Number one is companies talk but don't do, right? There's a lot of greenwashing, right? Everybody says they want a sustainable supply chain, right? So, I'll give you a positive example, right? Is if you look at AB InBev, Bavaria, or Budweiser, they're a client of ours. Their CEO stood up in 2017 and says, I want all my farmers to be skilled, financially empowered, and connected. And they took it seriously, right? And they used BanQu to now deliver on that promise. So they're not just greenwashing. Yet for every AB and Bev out there, you'll find five other companies who will talk about it, but not do anything about it. So the challenge is constant greenwashing. That's number one. Number two is there's this misunderstanding or confusion around the value of blockchain at the last mile, first mile. So we work with a lot of recyclers, we work with a lot of farmers, and the way we built it, there is no interface. Our interface is an SMS message, right? So there's a lot of confusion still saying, oh, this blockchain thing, do I have to develop an app? Do I need a crypto wallet? No. If you look at thousands of our waste pickers, they use BanQu every day through SMS. So we've struggled with breaking that misunderstanding about the value of blockchain and can it scale, right? So it's constantly that. And then the third one, at least, which is probably the most important one from my experience, is this pity lens that I was talking about, right? I get on calls where people say, wait a minute, these are poor farmers, they are illiterate, and I really lose it. I actually feel offended when somebody says that people in poverty are illiterate. That is not true at all. People in poverty are extremely smart because they can survive in poverty, right? So I think the challenge that we always run into is to kind of dispel this notion that just because it's a poor farmer, they are not literate, right? In fact, I've never met a farmer who's, all farmers I've met are smart, right? Especially women farmers. They know how to use mobile money. They know how to use SMS, right? So those are the three barriers that we constantly run into that we have to continue to educate, because as you realize, in none of those three problems, the problem was the farmer or the problem was the waste picker. The problem was the brand's misunderstanding of their supply chain.
And that's a very interesting way of looking at it or even explaining it, and it actually makes a lot of sense to me. That does make sense. So thank you for sharing. I wanted to know, what are some of the challenges that your users might face?
So I'll explain that in terms of a live example, right? If you go to Colombia, for example, we work with thousands of waste pickers and recyclers, right? And if you look at that supply chain, a mother who picks up the bottles on the street of Bogota, she will collect the material, sell it to a co-op. Co-op will sell it to an aggregator. Aggregator will sell it to the brand, and you have bottles to be returnable. In that supply chain, right? That mother actually has an SMS phone 99% of the time. So we've never had any issues. We've never had to train the mother because that mother already knows how to use SMS. She knows how to use local currency, right? The training typically happens at the cooperative level or the aggregator level and at the brand level, right? So the challenges we run into are twofold. One is inherent in that supply chain, built into that is corruption, right? It's built into that. And then the easiest example I use is if I am a farmer and I sold a 40-kilo bag of barley at 16% moisture to a middleman, that middleman can then take that, dry it to 12%, and sell it upstream and never tell me that he got that incentive. The classic, right? That happens everywhere: Africa, Latin America, Asia. And so the challenge is to figure out, how do you educate that supply chain that there is a better way to reduce the corruption and create traceability and transparency. So that's always a challenge. And then the second challenge is that once you have this traceability and transparency, right, you have to start fixing the problems it's going to uncover, right? And I'll use the example, two examples actually. One is with AB and Bev. AB and Bev, and they've gone it publicly, constantly they're improving their system because they want BanQu to uncover any flaws in that last mile. In fact, if you see one of the UN interviews we gave, before BanQu started, they were sending these armored trucks. That's a dangerous thing. Now it's fully integrated with mobile money, where the mama says, just send my money on my M-Pesa SMS phone account, right? So it's probably made some middlemen unhappy, but you know what? AB InBev has the courage to say, I want to solve the challenge, right? And that's kind of an important one. Another example, when the pandemic hit, we started working with the Islamic Development Bank, and they use us now in 35 countries to ensure that all of the COVID supplies are actually getting to the families that deserve it, right? Now, think about that supply chain. You go, the challenges in trying to convince people to be traceable and transparent are pretty high, right? So those are some of the. One last thing I'll say is around child labor, right? One of the things which we're very unique, we've actually connected school attendance system to blockchain. So if you're in a mining area or if you're in a farming area, cacao and mining are the two industries where there's a rampant child labor, and we have a solution where you will know if the child is in school or not. The challenge is going to be, can the brand or will the brand have the courage to say, we don't want children in child labor, right? The recent Supreme Court case, if you saw, the big cacao brand stood up and said, well, we really don't know because we don't know the farmer. That's not an excuse anymore. Maybe I'm going too deep. I'll stop there.
Thank you. That definitely provided a lot of insight. So thank you. So you've touched on this a little bit before, but I wanted to come back again and ask more specifically, with a greater recognition of gender inequity and inequality in this modern world, how does BanQu help to address this specific problem?
Oh, we are deeply anchored in that, right? So I'll give you a specific example. Take mobile money. If you go in any part of the world that has mobile money, right? And I say this with all sincerity, why women are smarter than men, because women tend to use money much better. I have seen hundreds and thousands of times when the women get paid on the phone, they will not cash out. They'll pay for school fees. They pay for solar home system. Men will tend to cash out. I rest my case, right? It's a simple, easy, nothing to do with anything example, right? It's pretty clear. The second reason is that why when we go out with farmers or waste pickers, right? We say men and women equal, but we stress with the women waste pickers or the women farmers and says, Mama, this when you bring, it has to be your phone, not your husband's phone, not your brother's phone, not your son's phone, because the M-Pesa money is going to go to your phone because you start building this bankability, right? And what we have seen now in thousands of cases is where the women farmer's impact on the ecosystem is much larger because she now is taking care of school fees, she's taking care of other parts of the ecosystem. So I'm a firm believer, and this is just my opinion, the more women farmers, women recyclers we empower, you'll be able to address not only gender inequity, but you're going to also address things like girls staying in school. You're going to be able to address things around environment. You'll be able to address things around extreme poverty. I hope that answers the question. Because an economic passport to a woman gives much more equality in the ecosystem than an economic passport for a man. That's my opinion.
Yes, and thank you for expounding on that and giving me those different ways that BanQu is helping to address gender inequity. My next question is, what are some of BanQu's milestones that you're proud of?
So look, for me, milestones are less about BenQ, honestly, and it's with all humility, right? It's more about the stories that for me are milestones, right? So I'll give you two. which are kind of very dear to my heart. And it was about almost 2.5 or 3 years ago when we did the first mobile money transaction, right? So up until then we were cash, right? But then we integrated with MTN and Airtel. And I was on the Congo Zambia border, and the first mobile money transaction that we did, where this mother got paid for her cassava directly on an SMS phone, right? So this is like no smartphone, right? We're talking the lowest possible phone, right? And she starts laughing. And, I thought I was probably being an idiot, right? Which I am most of the time. And I'm like, what did we do wrong, right? And then through an interpreter, he said, no, she's smiling because her school fees and her solar home system was due. She just punched in the code and paid for it. And for me, that was a massive milestone because we were a nobody, right? Because we're just a software company, right? But we had enabled this mother to now own her destiny, right? So I think that's a massive milestone, in my opinion. Um, and then the second milestone was last year, right? When COVID hit, you know, when we started working with Islamic Development Bank, far out places like Mali and Sudan and Senegal, they had traceability of something as simple as bags of rice getting to people in poverty, right? And for me, it was less around BanQu per se. We're just the rails. It was more about the human spirit actually leveraging technology in that last mile, right? So I would say those would be, the two milestones, at least for me personally. One is tied to gender, and the second one tied to just equality in terms of when we're in a crisis mode. But we have other milestones, right? I'm not trying to walk away. I'll tell you, right? I mean, in the end of last year, we turned profitable. That's a big deal. Nobody in the blockchain space can say that. That's not touching cryptocurrency. We are about a $3 million profitable software company. We're live in 45 countries. We have over 1 million people on our platform. Big milestones, right? But we measure profit and purpose. So that's why I stress the purpose side.
Yes, of course. And you just also mentioned that you are currently operating in 45 countries. Where do you see BanQu going next?
So I have this crazy dream, which is hasn't, and Catherine knows this from the day when we started. Is we want to be $100 million company and enable 100 million people out of poverty. And I'm not going to stop till I get there, right? And as I told you, we're a little over 1 million, so far from that. So I think for us, our milestones are all tied to that lens. Smaller milestones would love to get to 10 million on both sides here in the next 12 months, if possible. That's one milestone, and I think for us, it's really just staying the course.
Okay, and so my last question for you is who or what inspires you and why?
Oh wow, that's a great question. To be honest, it's um, the mama farmers and the mama waste pickers inspire me, and I'll give you a story. If you can cut it out or whatever. But when I was in Bogota last year, right before the quarantine, I met this young mother, single mother. She has a 4-year-old daughter, and we were about to go live, and she had a little book in her hand, and I said, "What was it?" And it was history of the last 3 years of materials she had sold as a waste picker. And I'm like, this is amazing, right? She's like, it's worthless because nobody trusts me. Nobody will give me a decent loan so I can move my daughter out of the slum. And it broke my heart, right? And but then now, obviously she's on BanQu and she has all this data, right? So what inspires me is that somebody like her was already doing BanQu on paper, right? And all we did is just give it a blockchain face, right? So I think you know, she is my inspiration because trust me, I could not survive in that situation with a 4-year-old kid.